Hello and welcome to episode 56 of Driver Suit Blog Radio. As always, I'm your host, David G. Firestone. Last week's episode had some technical problems, but my problems didn't stop with episode 55. Between two nights of insomnia, with the second night ending with me having to call a repairman because the blower motor in our heater stopped working in 28-degree weather, to end up having to miss a day of work due to oversleeping and subsequently getting yelled at, the time between last week's episodes and this week's has been one to forget. I will give a shout out to Bill's Plumbing in the North Shore section of Evanston, Illinois. Your guys are great. Your repairman was good. You fixed my problem and you did it well. So, Bill's Plumbing and Heating gets an A in my book. Now, we're going to do things a little differently this week because I'm going to be recording the first two segments in advance. Yes, we're going to have three segments this week instead of two because I've had a few things that I've been wanting to say on some things. And we're going to save the racing news till the end of the episode instead of opening it up. Because I have to discuss a few things, and this is what I've been wanting to talk about sometime, and it does factor into the Chicago street race. And I'll go on another unrelated rant after this one. So, we all know that saying, you are your own worst enemy. Sometimes outside circumstances hamper you in life. Other times, you are the direct result of your own downfall. Now, this is the case for the city of Chicago and the Chicago Park District when it comes to the Chicago Bears situation. For those of you who live in Chicago, you've already heard of this, and many NFL fans also have, but for those of you who haven't, let me fill you in. So, not too long ago, the Chicago Bears, the team, bought the land that was once Arlington International Racecourse, or Arlington Park, on September 29th, 2021 for $197.2 million. Later developments confirmed this as the location for a brand new stadium for the Chicago Bears, which, if everything goes according to plan, should be open in 2033. Now, this new unnamed project is expected to cost $5 billion. Now, the city of Chicago and the Chicago Park District, not wanting to lose the Bears, announced a redesign of Soldier Field, which included, amongst other things, adding a dome and making new upgrades. These upgrades, however, do not address many of the long-term issues, which include, but are not limited to, the fact that the playing field is considered to be the worst in the NFL, and the city of Chicago has done very little to fix the issues. It doesn't change the fact that Soldier Field is the smallest venue in the NFL by far, despite the size of the Chicago Bears fan base and the size of Chicago. Because the Park District owns Soldier Field instead of the Bears, very little of the revenue generated at games goes to the Bears, but rather to the Chicago Park District, which is frankly somewhat mismanaged, as most things in Chicago tend to be. Due to its vicinity to the museum campus and downtown Chicago, the location makes Soldier Field very hard for fans to travel to, especially because of parking issues because of the aforementioned museum campus. Now, even with the massive renovations of the stadium from 2022 to 2023, which, by the way, also ended in Soldier Field being delisted as a National Historic Landmark on February 7, 2006, a lot of these previous issues still were not fixed, even in short term. Now, the fact is, and I don't care if you like this, I don't care if you hate this, the truth is the truth whether you like it or not. The Bears are moving to Arlington Heights, as Zoe here is sounding like a dove. It's one of the problems when you podcast with a cat, these things tend to happen, but I still love you. Now, as I was saying, the fact that the Bears are moving to Arlington Heights it's going to happen, and there's nothing that can be done to prevent this. You might not like this, but the city of Chicago gave the Bears no other option here. The needed renovations simply aren't going to happen. Some of it because the interest and the money and the support simply isn't there, and some of it is because it's just impossible given the location of Soldier Field. Think of it like this. Let's say you live in an old apartment building. You've had problems with the building, like you've had bad plumbing and electricity issues. Now let's say a new apartment goes up across the street where It's a brand new building and none of the issues are present. So the question becomes, if your lease is up, are you staying in the dump or are you moving to a better place? Now, if this sounds familiar, Atlanta Braves, Baltimore Colts, Oakland Athletics, LA LA Raiders, Cleveland Browns, and a lot of other sports fans know the tale because it's another verse of the same song. Most teams that move typically tend to because of at least one of the above mentioned issues, and the Braves who were one of the most recent ones, it's amazing how similar the Braves and the Bears story is. So, in 1997, the Atlanta Braves moved from Atlanta Fulton County Stadium to Turner Field, which in and of itself was constructed as part of the 1996 Olympics. Now, this design was only supposed to be short-term as opposed to long-term, which would come back to haunt the Braves and the city of Atlanta. By the late 2000s, it was clear that the stadium was clearly in disrepair. The tune was about $350 million, which was $150 million for structural issues, and the other $200 was for fan upgrades and various issues. Now, in addition to this, its location, like Soldier Field, made it problematic for fans to attend games. But the difference is the Atlanta Turner Field's problems were much worse. Much worse. Because apparently, having never lived in Atlanta, I've never traveled in Atlanta, but apparently Chicago traffic is nothing compared to Atlanta traffic. That's what I've heard. I mean, I don't drive, so. And it was problematic because it's a decent walk, like 3/4 of a mile from the nearest public transit, which in and of itself might not seem so bad. But the other problem was that the Turner Field was short 5,000 parking spaces. Okay? 5,000 parking spaces. Just take a second and think about that. If let's say every car has at least 3 people in it, okay? As fans who go to games typically go with a group of friends or family, so it's 3 to 4 per car. That's as many as 15 to 20,000 people who are inconvenienced between traffic and no parking. So obviously, this problem needed to be addressed, and the Braves went to the city of Atlanta and asked them, hey, could you fix up the stadium that you own? We need you to fix your problem. Well, the then Atlanta mayor, Kasim Reed, said that the city, quote, could not afford to support the upgrades the Braves needed because at the time, Atlanta was funding the construction of Mercedes-Benz Stadium to the tune of $1.6 billion, which benefited the Atlanta Falcons and really nobody else. So, realizing that you ain't going to get blood from a stone, the Braves ended up meeting with the various commissioners in Cobb County, Georgia, which is adjacent to Atlanta, but Atlanta is not a part of Cobb County. And it was eventually decided that a large area of Cumberland, Georgia, which is an unincorporated area within the county, would host the Braves' new stadium, which was named initially SunTrust Park, but is now Truist Park. Now, the stadium is working out well for the Braves and many of their fans because the city of Atlanta gave them no choice. And I should also mention that in researching this story, some people, especially those who tend to write more to promote agendas than looking at facts, some people change the narrative of this story of why the Braves moved. But it sounds good if you ignore the facts, and I prefer to deal in facts as opposed to fiction. I'm not here to promote agendas. I'm here to tell the truth. And guess what? This can also explain the departure of the Baltimore Colts, the departure of the original Cleveland Browns, the departure of the Oakland, LA, Oakland, and now Las Vegas Raiders, the departure of the St. Louis Rams, the impending departure of the Oakland Athletics. I mean, it's just this story has been told so many times in so many different ways because the entity involved that owned the stadium wanted to have their cake and eat it too. They wanted to keep the team, but they weren't willing to pay what was needed to keep the team, so the team in question moved. And guess what? I can promise you, it will happen again. We're already seeing it with Oakland, with the Oakland Athletics. The Coliseum was a dump. It's been a dump for years. It was never going to be anything more than a dump. And Oakland just said, we're not doing it, and so the Athletics are going to be departing soon. And you know what? I don't feel bad. I don't feel bad. As I said before, you are your own worst enemy in certain situations. You are your own worst enemy in certain situations. And when you lose a large revenue generating client because you don't want to put the effort in to keep them, you have nobody to blame but yourself. And right now, the city of Chicago, it has nobody to blame but themselves for losing the Bears. And at the end of the day, I really don't feel bad. Chicago gave the Bears no other choice, as I said before. But I bring all of this up because this may and probably will affect the Chicago street race. Why? Because this is another instance in the long history of the city of Chicago taking if it ain't broke, don't fix it approach, no matter how broken something obviously is. This is not the first time this has happened. This won't be the last time that's happened. But it's jarring how often it happens. And I say this because with the street race coming up, you know something is going to be broken by the time the street race gets here. We already know what needs to be done. We already know how it needs to be done. We already know everything that needs to be done in order for this race to happen. I am willing to wager a lot of money. At least one thing, if not more, will get screwed up on the city of Chicago's part. I'll wager money on that. Because it's an easy bet to make because you know I'm going to win. You know I'm going to win. We're traveling into uncharted territory with the Chicago street race. I guarantee you something, I can't tell you what, but I can guarantee you something is going to go south. And I don't want to be the guy that says I told you so, but I'm probably going to end up being the guy saying I told you so. And again, I've said this before. I'll say it again. I want this to work. I want this to be successful. But the city of Chicago is going to have to I don't think the city of Chicago is able to prove me wrong that where things are going to go wrong. They're going to have to work and they're going to have to prove me wrong. Something's going to get messed up here. And the problem with that is, and I've discussed this before too, fans are not tolerant of bad races anymore. I mean, look at the 2005 U.S. Grand Prix. Look at the 2008 Brickyard 400. Look at the 1995 U.S. 500. Look at IndyCar at Pocono. I mean, how many more examples do I have to give of one singular race destroying a race for eternity. It's just, you've had races that have been, you've had the 2005 US Grand Prix, which was so bad, it nearly killed Formula One in the United States for a decade. Fans do not put up with this anymore. I mean, there are people out there who are genuinely shocked that the Bristol Dirt Race is coming back, given how unpopular it's been over the last few years. And I don't blame them. I really don't. The city of Chicago has one shot to make this work. The city of Chicago has one chance to bring NASCAR back to Chicago in a unique way. The city of Chicago has one chance and one chance only. If they fail, it's not coming back. And we'll have to see how this works. I just don't think it will. And by the way, I'm not being negative. I'm being realistic. The difference is like, okay, let me just use this analogy. Like, let's say it's 1998 and you're working in Mountain Dew. And somebody comes in and says, we're going to be introducing a new product in the next few years. It's going to be called Mountain Dew Code Red. It's going to be a cherry flavor. What do you think of this proposal? If I were negative, I would say, well, I think it's going to fail, and I think we should only be focusing on one flavor of Mountain Dew. But if I were being realistic, I'd say, you know what, we'll look into this. It might work. Cherry is a good flavor combination with citrus. It might work. And as has been proven, it was. Now, let's say it's the same scenario, but instead of cherry flavored, it's sauerkraut flavored, and it's not a joke or being funny, it's being dead serious. Your boss says, we're going to be trying a new sauerkraut flavor from Mountain Dew. You would analyze it. You would look at all the positives, all the negatives. You would see that the negatives vastly outweigh the positives, and you would say, no, this isn't going to work. That's my approach. I'm not saying this is going to fail because I'm negative. I'm saying this is going to fail because I'm analyzing various issues that surround it. I'm analyzing issues that are coming up as I'm doing research. I'm even doing issues that I hadn't even thought of until I saw stories about them. And I'm just seeing all of this and how none of it's being addressed. None of the modifications that need to happen seem to be happening. There doesn't seem to be any urgency despite the fact that the clock is ticking. So looking at this objectively, I don't think this is going to work based on everything that I've just described. I'm not being negative. I don't want it to fail, again. But just looking at all the evidence of all the things that are going wrong at any given moment, I just don't see it working. Now, again, I could be wrong. Maybe the city of Chicago can get their shit together, but I really don't think so, given how long I've been in this area, how much I've seen. I just don't think it's going to work as much as I would hope it to be. With that, we're going to be taking our first of 2 breaks. And when I come back, I will come back with some thoughts on the Power Slap League by Dana White. And we're back. So, this is the second segment of Fear we're going to be doing. I wasn't even going to do 3 segments this week, but then something happened that I need to talk about this. I need to talk about how much it sucks, how disgusting it is, and just how this makes me sick to my stomach. Now, Well, I can't say that I am the biggest fan. I am a fan of MMA, and I'll watch it on occasion. If there's something else on that I want to watch, I'll watch it. So I'm very much aware of those in the UFC. As a direct result of this, I'm also very much aware of the sentient bag of sickly dog shit that is Dana White. Despite only being worth $500 million, Dana White is the embodiment of every out-of-touch billionaire who runs a team or sport in general. He's the kind of guy who is... He is the reason I say that everybody in life needs people around them, whether it be personal life, professional, whatever, who are not scared of them to tell them the truth and when they're about to make very bad decisions, because Dana White clearly does not have these people in his life. Because he's been involved in a lot of controversies. Now, aside from being an out-of-touch, super rich white guy who is known to frequent Joe Rogan's podcast, don't even get me started on that guy, White's also been accused of, or have been involved with a bunch of other issues, such as being accused of turning his back on family and friends after finding success in promoting the UFC, regardless of how useful these individuals were in helping them get to that point. He was involved in a sex tape scandal with a stripper who, along with her live-in boyfriend, filmed him and then tried to unsuccessfully blackmail him, which all that did was ending up getting the boyfriend in legal trouble. He's also pretty much been involved with every questionable decision within the UFC, including the infamous Reebok deal, which limited fighter pay due to lack of ads on in-fight clothing unless they're official sponsors, which cost fighters lots of money. A lot of money. But it's two controversies in recent weeks which are actually intertwined with each other that I want to talk about today. So, on New Year's Eve, Dana White and his wife were in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. They were filmed by somebody. They were obviously drinking, as you do on New Year's Eve. I'm not going to come down on him for that. I'm very much guilty of that myself. And sometimes when you get drunk, you argue with each other. And, well, I don't know what exactly transpired between them. I don't know what the argument was about. But I do know that White and his wife physically assaulted each other. Now, I'm not saying that this is all Dana White's fault. In fact, if you watch the footage, she slaps him, but then he slaps her. Now, again, I'm not saying that anyone's in the right here. I'm not saying they're both in the wrong, but I'm not saying anybody's right here. Now, to their credit, I'll give them this little bit of slack, because they both came out and said what we did was reprehensible. This is not what we are. I'm sorry that it has to happen, and they both took responsibility for it, which is more than I can say for a lot of these people. Oh boy. But what ended up happening was, in a moment of irony, TBS, or Turner Broadcasting System, they didn't cancel his new show, they just delayed it. Which is sort of why I'm talking about this right now, because the show in question was the second issue itself. It's called Power Slap, or Power Slap Road to the Title. Wikipedia sums up the show as follows. Quote, quote unquote, anytime I use sport, I'm going to do quotes, by the way. The quote unquote sport, which has been licensed by the Nevada State Athletic Commission, uses rules established by other slap fighting leagues. After a coin toss to determine who goes first, the first striker has a time limit of 30 seconds to deliver an open-handed slap to the opponent. Slaps must be below the eye but above the chin without leading with the palm, such that all hand-to-face contact takes place at the same time. Those being slapped may not flinch, raise their shoulder, or tuck in their chins. After being slapped, the slapped competitor has 30 seconds to recover and get back into the position before it's time for their turn to slap. Fights which don't end in a knockout and go 3 rounds go to a judge's decision using a 10-point system. Couple of things here. First and foremost, and most pressing right now, there is more than one of these slap fighting leagues? How? How can there possibly be more than one? Why? And while we're on the subject, who in their right mind thought it would be a good idea to set up a league with rules about 2 morons slapping each other in the face for no reason and consider that to be a quote-unquote sport? I've seen these kind of things happen at frat parties. But given the amount of alcohol the 2 participants have consumed, and given how much alcohol was present, that wasn't shocking. I can speak from personal experience, stating that if left to their own devices, drunk people and drunk frat boys will always figure out a way to do the dumbest shit possible. I had a roommate, a dormmate, a housemate, whatever you want to call them, where over the course of a 7-day period, I had to call 911 because this drunken idiot got a cue ball stuck in his mouth. Yes, this is a real thing. I didn't even know that was possible. But then, not even like 5 days later, I had to bail him out of jail because he drunkenly went to 7-Eleven and passed out in an ice machine and got arrested. So yeah, drunken frat boys, I don't find that behavior shocking as much. But when you have people who are actually intentionally doing this sober and for money, yeah, it's kind of amazing. Second off, lost my place. Okay, this is when I also want to really question, why in the world would the Nevada State Athletic Commission willingly sanction this as a quote-unquote sport? I don't get it. Why do you need official sanctioning here? What is the point? This doesn't need official state-enforced regulation. I don't even know how this is even legal, let alone how it gets official support. I get why UFC, I get why boxing would need those kinds of regulations. I even get why professional wrestling would need some of these sanctioning bodies. I get it. But there's always a point to everyone. Like, there's always a point to why a boxing match happens. There's always a point to why a UFC match happens or a professional wrestling match happens. It's always happening for some legitimate reason. There is no reason whatsoever why this should be a league. This is not an actual sport. This is just 2 dipshits slapping each other in the face as hard as humanly possible. And what is the plan to bring in fans here? This is like, Power Slap is like every other like reality TV freak show. It's like Intervention or Hoarders. You're not there because you're there to watch the freak show. Okay, that's why TLC is still on the air after all these years, because it's pretty much their entire programming is a freak show. And this is like Jackass if Jackass were less thought out and with better production. Now, third, I had to force myself to watch this because I wasn't watching it because I thought it would be good. I just had to see if they really think this is a good idea. The only piece of positive thinking I can come up with was that this show needs a name change. You should change the name of this show to Studying Concussion Symptoms in Real Time. Now, after forcing myself to watch it, and this was a hard watch, I forced myself to watch the first episode. I'm never watching another episode again. Because this seems like it should be shown to doctors, teachers, paramedics, sports coaches on how concussions happen and the signs to look out for. Because in this first episode, there are 3 separate people who not only suffered very severe concussions, but as a direct result, more than likely have suffered long-term brain damage as a direct result of their participation. 3 separate people, independent of each other. It wasn't like there were 2 in one match. It was 3 different matches with 3 different people. And again, 3 separate people will have lifetime brain damage, CTE, many other health problems, all because they wanted to be on a reality TV freak show. Way to go, guys and girls, because one of them was a girl. I don't consider them to be men and women because real men and real women wouldn't be doing this, but guys and girls would. Way to go. I've watched a lot of shows over the years. I've watched some things that have forced me to look at myself. This was one of the hardest shows I've ever had to watch for all the wrong reasons. I'm not watching the second episode. And at the time of this release, there are another 6 episodes. Yes, there are 8 episodes in this first season. Who approved this? Is the bar for television at this point so low that people legitimately damaging themselves for the remainder of their lives is now considered quote-unquote entertainment? I don't even know if all the rest of the 6 will air, given how negative the people watching have reacted. I can't say that I blame them. Chris Nowinski, who is a former WWE wrestler who had to retire because of concussion issues and went on to found a foundation to study concussion problems, was mortified and horrified. If you go to his YouTube channel, you can see the footage of what I'm talking about, but I warn you, it's not an easy watch. And I don't want to hear this excuse, well, you're a race car fan and you like watching wrecks. Yeah, I do. Provided everybody is not injured. If a driver gets out and waves to the crowd and everybody's fine, good. I'm happy. But if people get injured, people get killed, I'm sick to my stomach about it. And that's exactly the way I felt here. Nobody benefits, everyone loses. Some are losing more horrifically than others. And it just makes me sick. It made me physically ill to try and watch this race. It made me physically ill to watch this. And again, I'm a person. I have emotions. I have empathy. And I've seen what brain damage does to, amongst other race car drivers especially. I mean, look at what happened with Dale Jr. Dale Jarrett's been open about his concussion issues. Ricky Craven. And those are just the ones who have been more open about it. I guarantee you there's a lot more who have a lot more damage. Football sports, combat athletes, and professional wrestlers, amongst others, all have to worry about this and all are dealing with it. I'm genuinely concerned about their health and safety, as am I the people who are involved in this. Now, the good thing about my approach to this is the overwhelming majority of the people on the internet agree with me. And they're disgusted by this too. Dana White's getting called out. TBS is getting called out. I don't think that this show is going to last. I can guarantee you it's not getting picked up again, given how negative people are reacting. But I don't think this show is going to last. So, as I was listening to this while I was editing this week's episode, I decided I needed to make a clarification because I overlooked something. Now, I had literally just finished watching the first episode while I had recorded the rant, and I was so angry at what I saw, I just let loose. I stand by everything I said, but I do need to say something in terms of clarifications, because there were a number of knockouts and injuries during the first episode. The three that I was specifically referring to was Sheena Bathroy knocking out Courtney Olson, Wesley Dre knocking out John Kennedy, and Vern Cathy knocking out Devon Schwann. Now, as I said, while there were a number of knockouts and other injuries during the first episode, the three that I just mentioned were the worst looking. It's obvious that Olsen, Kennedy, and Schwann all suffered very severe concussions. I mean, you can't even argue that watching the footage. But Courtney Olsen's was the worst one of all in terms of visually, because you see as soon as she gets knocked out, her eyes roll back in her head, she collapses to the ground. Then she tries to stand up, not knowing where she is, and does a forward roll. Now, I should say that the rest of the show was hard to watch in terms of injuries and knockouts. I don't understand why anybody would willingly do this. And I'm not taking away from the other injuries. I should have made that clear. I think this whole thing, I don't even know how this is legal. How in the world is something like this legal? Why is it legal? Who made it legal? Why is it getting official oversight? There's just so many questions that don't have answers that I don't understand how and why. Okay, with that out of the way, we're going to get to the news stories after the second break. Okay, the final segment for this week is some news and notes. First off, we start off with an interesting development for Formula One, and it was during the time where I wasn't really paying attention because I was so sick of their bullshit. But apparently there is now an American driver in Formula One. His name is Logan Sargent. He will be driving for what used to be Williams Grand Prix Engineering, which is now Williams Racing. I much prefer Williams Grand Prix Engineering myself. Now, Logan Sargent will be the first driver since Manor Mariusa F1 driver Alexander Rossi in 2015. Now, as we all know, after that season, he came to IndyCar and won the 2016 Indianapolis 500. Now, the obvious question that I think is, will this bring in American viewers? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Williams Engineering, let's be honest here, is not a great team at this point. They've sunk a lot. They're a shell of what they used to be. They are not, by any stretch of the imagination, a championship caliber team. I'm not even sure they score more than about 7 or 8 points this year as a team. He's not going to be a contender. I don't see how he possibly could. And also, the racing boom of the 1990s is over. Yeah, I know, blah, blah, blah. Now, in terms of trying to get a bigger piece of the American pie, this is a good look, and it's a good move. But will this work out long time is something that we're going to have to see. So, next we move to the NHRA, where it was announced that Tim Wilkerson and JCM Racing team over John Maynard will combine to form Maynard Wilkerson Racing and will see Skag Power Equipment as a primary sponsor, with Levi Ray and Shalp returning as a sponsor. Wilkerson will be the funny car side of JCM with Tony Schumacher being the Top Fuel dragster side. Now, I'm glad that JCM has a second Nitro team, and I wish them the best. And I think it's kind of amazing that a few years ago, there were 3 super teams. Now there are simply 2. There's Force and there's Coletta. And I'm sad to see Don Schumacher Racing go the way it has, but if you look at it objectively, Ron Capps, Antron Brown have all founded their 2 teams, which are doing decently well. Capps is the champion. And Leah Pruitt and her husband, Tony Stewart, founded Tony Stewart Nitro, which has Leah Pruitt and Matt Hagan. So I'm sad to see it go, but it's good. It's a good thing that the individual parts are all doing well on their own. Okay, so this is a story where the subtext is screaming. Now, this is an article by Jim Utter. I will put the link in the description. And this is a series of quotes from RFK Racing President Steve Newmark. And I should also note that this is very badly edited in terms of some of the words that were used. So I'm going to try my best, so please bear with me on this. Quote, "The dialogue continues between NASCAR and the negotiating committee. A lot of the same issues are still the same issues we're working through. There is a model that works for everybody, which actually helps take the sport to the next level. There's just a lot of pieces that we have to figure out how to get there. The reason I have so much optimism is that we can get a deal done. The reason I have so much optimism that we can get a deal done is because the sport is growing. If we were in a situation like 5 years ago where the sport was stagnated, it might be more difficult to come up with a whole new paradigm. The sanctioning body, the tracks, the teams, and the drivers, you have to have all of them working together and rowing in the same direction. The issue right now is that the teams from an economic perspective are struggling. Our financial model doesn't work, but the sport is still thriving." No, it isn't. "Because of that, we know there is a path forward to figure it out. It's going to take a lot more work. It may take 2 steps backwards." The actual text reads, "It may take 2 steps backwards. It may take 2 steps backwards, 1 step forward." It's not a lot different than what a lot of other sports have gone through. It's just a little more foreign to us because of the way this sport has been run for so long. It's something I would definitely pay attention to in the last few weeks. Again, just proofread it a little bit, number 1. Number 2, here's what I'm seeing. And maybe I'm wrong on this, but this is what I'm seeing. From that quote, I'm thinking that NASCAR is holding firm to their side and the teams are not going to get much of what they want. Now, while there is hope that this deal can be made, I think it's hope without evidence. Now, I'm not going to side with either side here. I think both sides need to give and both sides need to gain. Now, in terms of television contracts, I don't know who NASCAR is going to sign with either. It is obvious to pretty much everyone that NBC needs to go. I mean, I've talked about TV ratings. I've talked about corporate strategies. NBC needs to go, and that's been obvious for some time. Especially because they are destined to put racing on Peacock, and we all saw how badly that went with the Toronto race last year. Okay. But the question now is, who can replace them? I mean, and that's an entirely different story. The 2 big candidates in my mind are 3 candidates now that I think about it. It would be ESPN, CBS, or Turner. Well, I think Turner's not an option because they don't have a broadcast equivalent. And plus, NASCAR fans hate them even more than NBC, if that's at all possible. ESPN might be able to throw some money their way, but in terms of the way that ESPN has treated NASCAR over the years, might not be the best move either. And then the third and final, and I think what might be the best option, is CBS. I mean, yeah, they're going to put stuff on the streaming platform too, but at least the streaming platform in question is better than Paramount Plus is better than Peacock. I don't care what anybody says. And besides that, Peacock hemorrhages viewers and loses money. Paramount Plus doesn't, at least not on the level. So it's hope without direction, hope without evidence. I hope the teams can come to an agreement. I don't think they will, and I really hope I'm wrong on that. Now, this last news story annoys me for several reasons. So, last week, some Las Vegas bookmakers decided they needed to get some bets in because it was announced that Chase Elliott is the favorite to win the 2023 NASCAR Cup Series championships. According to the same odds makers, Chase Elliott has odds of plus 550 and a 15.4% implied chance, whatever those are. I don't bet on sports because I'm not stupid, so I don't bet on sports. But can I ask a question that doesn't seem to be answered here? What are you basing that on, number one? And number two, could we at least wait until the season starts before we start making odds who can win the championship? The Busch Light Clash at the Coliseum is 2 days from the day at the time of uploading. Could we please wait until then to make the odds? Because if you make sports bets, number one, I think if you make sports bets, you're crazy to begin with. You're betting on odds makers. And let's be honest here, we all know how honest some of these guys are. But if you're going to make odds on a season that hasn't begun yet and won't begin in earnest for at least 2 or 3 weeks, that's a surefire way to lose money. And what scares me here is obviously that this can work because people are going to be making these bets. They wouldn't be announcing this if they didn't think it would. I don't know why. I think it's a sucker's game to lose money. I think at the end of the day, sports gambling is a dangerous animal, and I don't trust odds makers. I don't trust casinos. I don't really go to casinos. So it's just a bad look all around. Whew. Okay. That's done. That's it for this week. I'll be back with my thoughts on the Clash. I'm Dave Frosting. If you like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next week for episode 57 of Driver Suit Blog Radio.